And good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you may be around the world. I am Marcus Holmes, and I am excited to bring you, on behalf of the Love and Stuff community, another wonderful Black History Month moment. We have been celebrating all month long the extraordinary accomplishments and contributions, the harrowing events and stories, the uniqueness and royalty of all of those that are of African American and African descent, and their contributions and impact on our world, particularly through the lens and the melting pot of the United States of America. And so this week we have been talking about architecture and the arts. And we continue that journey all week long as we look at not only architects and architecture as a profession, or buildings or significant experiences in those buildings, but also the arts, from art forms that are uniquely originated by persons of African American descent, such as blues and jazz, and many other opportunities to celebrate all that we can celebrate in this month of our great history and heritage. It is a part of our history and heritage, and whether or not it's written collectively in any one book or any series of books, whether or not it is something that you knew before, it's a part of the history of this country. And so we wanted to ensure that we did our part in upping our love game to ensure that we bring you Black History Month moments. We will culminate this celebration all month long on Sunday at 6:00 p.m. And we hope to see you there live on the Love and Stuff page, and broadcasting just as we are tonight via LinkedIn Live, Twitch TV, YouTube events, and of course our Facebook pages, the Love and Stuff page and the Marcus R. Holmes page. Back with us tonight is one of the members of our Love and Stuff community who loves all things, I'll call it all things Africana. And I am excited to hear what he is bringing tonight in the way of a Black History Month moment. You don't want to miss a second of it. So I want to give you just a moment to click share and tag some folks within your circle of influence. Tag those relatives that you know, hey, they really haven't thought about Black History Month, or they might learn something new. Even if you don't have a specific fascination about architecture or the arts, you may learn something that ignites or is a contagion for you to pick up a book, for you to watch a movie or a piece of content to learn more about the African American experience. And here is a gentleman who is passionate about this, and I hope that passion just pours through the camera to you, and that you will too be ignited to find out some nuggets about the history of our great people. Speaking of none other than Darren Williams, who is, I always say, a Detroiter at heart, that he is transplanted to Oklahoma. We let them borrow him for a season, and so they can do that for a season, but he is homegrown, U.S. Detroit authorized. That's what it is. It's USDA. U.S. Detroit authorized up here in Love and Stuff. And we're excited to have him in our community and excited to introduce him to you. So hearts and emojis and likes for Darren Williams. Hello there, sir.
Good evening, Brother Marcus. How you doing tonight?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for joining us and joining us across all platforms. People are joining. And so I'm excited for what you will offer today. I am going to get out of the way and let you have the floor. Again, ladies and gentlemen, Darren Williams.
All right. Thank you, sir. And thank you for the opportunity to be here to get to present a little bit tonight on architecture from African American perspective this way. I'm not exactly sure what has gone on before me. And so hopefully I don't duplicate or talk about or step into what anybody else has done. Just again, before I get to that, let me acknowledge, yes, Detroit born, Detroit bred. When I die, I will be Detroit dead. I am certainly all about everything about my hometown, even though I have not lived there in more than 25, maybe 30 years at this time. But I'm Detroit. If you know me, anybody that knows me, where I've lived before, other than outside of the city, they know it's all about Detroit for me. Yes, I actually do want to talk about architecture and just briefly some about arts because it's directly connected to African American architecture. I had some images. I'm not sure if they will actually make it into the presentation because I was extremely late with putting those or getting those sent in. And so I'm going to talk about what the architecture, and I'll direct you to be able to, or at least suggest to you that you can find all of these images online and be able to see them if we don't get to make them as a part of the presentation. I want to talk about first pyramids, and don't stretch your mind back so far first when I say that, because the pyramids that I want to talk to us about first are pyramids that exist in the United States of America. Not actually any serious historical building feats in terms of these pyramids. Actually, they are entertainment. They are thematic venues for cities that have built and host these things. First pyramid is the Hotel of Luxor in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you've been to Las Vegas on the Strip and the area where Luxor is, you will see the humongous, imposing figure of image as a figure of the Sphinx in front of the building, which is giant lion body with a clearly Egyptian African head, a pharaonic head on top of the lion's body. This image is called the Sphinx, and it sits in front of what is an even larger figure in behind it, which is the pyramid, the Luxor Hotel, 4,400 rooms, I believe it was, built in 1993. I bring this to us, I mentioned this one to us, and I give the date for it, because on the scale of human history, the face of human history, the Luxor Hotel is the last pyramid, I believe, that was actually built by human hands. And so 1993, it is an impressive structure, of course, to be as big as it is, to be 4,000, to have 4,400 rooms in it. It is an incredible manifestation of beauty and architecture, but it is not the only one that exists in the world, in the United States of America. Even the second pyramid that exists in the United States of America, if you travel down south to Memphis, Tennessee, you will find another pyramid built in 1991, the one in Memphis, Tennessee. Very interestingly, it has been the place. We talked about our religious leaders and our religious tradition earlier. It's been the place where many religious conventions for African Americans have been held there in Memphis, Tennessee, at the pyramid there. As I understand, the pyramid is the property now of the Bass Pro Shops, which is the sports and wildlife conglomerate. And they have a huge logo of the Bass Pro Shops logo that is right. They've put it, interface it on top of the pyramid itself there in Memphis, Tennessee. Interestingly, there are a lot of nicknames that the Memphis pyramid has. They call it the Bass Pyramid or Bass Pro Shops Pyramid. One of the other names that I saw about it, they call it the Tomb of Doom. And they get that well, I'm not sure where they get that understanding from, but it goes by several different names. So right here in the United States of America, we have examples of what are pyramidal structures. The interesting fact about this, that the pyramids that are built here, Las Vegas, Nevada, Memphis, Tennessee, were not built by Africans. African Americans weren't built by Black people. They were built by white contractors, white builders. However, the idea of pyramids and pyramid buildings, the structure itself, is not an American idea. It is not the product of the mind of Europeans or white people anywhere else. And even though these pyramids are the last to be built in the United States of America, Las Vegas, Nevada, and in Memphis, Tennessee, they were not the first pyramids to be built in the Americas. In order for us to find what are the first pyramids that are built in America, we'd have to travel all the way through Central and South America to find the ones that are built there. There are some in the Yucatan Peninsula where Cancun Island is, or in the Cozumel areas. There are some structures that are built there. These structures, we understand, at least to be dated during the time of the Mayan Empire. So the Mayan are the ones who are credited with building these structures. There are 5 of them that are most notable. These 5 are not the only ones, but these are 5 of the ones throughout Central America and Mexico that still exist. These date somewhere between the 300s to the 900s AD. So from the 4th century to the 10th century is when these pyramids are constructed. First one of the 5, El Castillo in Chichen Itza, Mexico. And what you'll interestingly find about these pyramids, contrasted with what we've just talked about in Las Vegas and in Memphis, as these pyramidal structures that are flat at the top and go pointed, flat at the bottom and go pointed at the top, and the pyramids that we'll talk about to end this, these pyramids are what are called step pyramids. And I'll mention something about that is very fascinating, or should be something of interest to us too. So these 5 that I'm talking about to us, El Castillo in Chichen Itza, Mexico, Huantanich in Belize is another. There's one called Tikal in Guatemala. There's one Copan in Honduras. And there is one El Tazamal in El Salvador. And so before then, the population had expanded throughout the other northern areas of Mexico. These areas, the northern areas of the Americas, of what we call the United States, these places in Central America and in South America already had pyramidal structures that were built. And again, most of these were step pyramids, not just the smooth side ones that we are generally associated with. And that'll be, again, important in just a few minutes when I talk about where the influence of these things may have come. Interestingly, the Mayans would be one of the second or last cultures that would lead to what we commonly understand as the spreading of the other indigenous populations, Mexican and native populations in the Americas. However, the interesting thing to note is that the route called trade winds, the trade wind rights on the Atlantic, in the Atlantic Ocean, they swirl and circle from the west coast of Africa straight through to this area of the America, South America and Central America, which means that if you got on a raft, if you got on a boat, if you didn't have any engine, even if you didn't have any paddles or oars, The trade winds, the current of the trade wind would actually carry your flotilla, whatever device you were on, from the western coast of Africa into this region of South and Central America. In Ivan Van Sertima's book, I talked about it a few days ago, They Came Before Columbus. He describes how that there is evidence, and he has documented it very well, that from the west coast of Africa, Africans came to this part of the world. The connection, or what the point to be made in what I'm explaining to us now, is that seeing pyramidal structures here in the Americas and realizing that those type of structures actually originate in another part of the world, the continent of Africa, begins to make one wonder, what then is the connection between what we have learned about here as pyramids and what we know about Africa and the origination of pyramids in that part of the world. And let's talk about, just for a moment, some of the great architecture from that part of the world. I've already described to us at Luxor, the hotel in Las Vegas, about how the Sphinx, the figure of the Sphinx sits in front of it, and the hotel, the Luxor Hotel itself, is supposed to be a model of the Great Pyramid. That Sphinx is an actual structure, an architectural and artistic structure that exists to this day. The remains are still there in the Giza Plateau of Egypt. The Sphinx is a very remarkable display of ancient Egyptian architecture, yes, but more than that, the mind of the Egyptian to create such a display and the meaning that is given to it in its context as the guard of the Great Pyramid. The Sphinx itself, some of the questions that are asked about it is, why did the Sphinx guard the pyramid? And the Egyptians built Sphinx statues. So this isn't the only one. This is the most prominent one because it's the largest one. But they built these Sphinx to guard statues, and it was important because the areas were tombs. It is where some of the most important figures in the life of the Egyptians, they were buried underneath these pyramids. And so in the religious context, the spiritual context of the Egyptian, this Sphinx set as a guard to the tomb itself, which was the resting place, or better understood even as ascension place, of the royalty of Egypt. The question some may ask is, does the Sphinx predate the pyramids? One scholar notes that for centuries, starting in the period of the New Kingdom and throughout Roman times, the Great Sphinx of Giza was considered to have been built before the pyramids. However, oral traditions of villagers who lived in the Giza area date the Sphinx at about 5,000 BC. And so some actually believe, some scholars, that it is older than. But in terms of the construction of the Sphinx and the construction of the Great Pyramid, which we'll talk about now, we're looking at a date on the camera that is somewhere in the area of 5,500 to 6,000 years older, or from the date where we are right now on the calendar. The Great Pyramid, don't have pictures to get to show us of this, but all of this information that I'm talking about is something that you can Google. The importance of it, and again, as I'm going into talking about the Great Pyramid, is that you are talking about a structure, when you come to this one, 481 feet tall, that's like 19 stories tall. that not only do men of architecture and builders or archaeologists or any field at all, there is no knowledge or technology that we have, one, to understand how the Great Pyramid of Giza was actually built. But not only that, there is no technology on the planet that can actually disassemble the pyramid, that it was so well built that the size of the block, some of them weighing 20 tons, and that they were put together in such a fashion that there is no sealant, that there is no kind of substance that was used to cause them to cohere together, but they were cut and fashioned in a way, and that they are so well put together that you cannot couldn't put a sheet of paper between the wedges of where one stone was laid against another. And so you're talking about, in this construction of the Great Pyramid, you're talking about an intellect, an ingenuity, you're talking about an energy, you're talking about a work that there is nothing that exists on the planet that can actually rival what went into building of the Great Pyramid. Another thing that's very interesting to note about the Great Pyramid is how it is aligned. The Great Pyramid and the Giza Plaza does not stand alone. There are two other pyramids that stand on either side of it. And what is fascinating, that physicists and scientists have discovered, that the alignment of the Great Pyramid and the other two that exist beside it are in direct alignment with Orion's belt in the heavens, that the alignment is in a perfect sequential positioning with what exists in the heavens, which has given many scholars to thinking and considering if the construction of this pyramid had a far greater purpose than just as a burial tomb for the pharaoh. Some have suggested, because of other design elements that are included in the pyramid, there are different shafts that appear on different sides, and at certain points at the solar equinox, when it is summer solstice and when it is winter solstice, the sun in a certain position shines through a shaft that lights up the entire inside of the pyramid. And this occurs 2 times a year, summer solstice, winter solstice. And so as scientists have found out that this is actually a reality, it has led to trying to determine, to understand if there is something more behind or under or in the building and the construction and meaning of the Great Pyramid. One of the things that's most interesting to note about that too is that scientists know less about what they have found in Egypt now regarding the Great Pyramids and other structures there than they have information on. What has happened in so many years, things have been suggested and offered as the meaning for and the reasons for these things. And in being able to understand from the culture of the people that what these scientists have said, however many decades ago, is nowhere even close to what is really happening there with the Great Pyramids of Egypt. The thing I'll say next, as I move to the last point that I want to make, the last part of architecture that I want to talk about and discuss, is that not only did the Egyptian create these structures that rival, that there are no rivals for anywhere else in the world. Dr. Anthony Browder says it best. He says, and the Egyptians left documentation for everything that they did. That documentation exists in what we call hieroglyphics. All through many of the burial chambers of the pyramids, all through other places, temples that have been built throughout Egypt, throughout the land, There is documentation by the Egyptian that is written in what we call hieroglyphics, which is a Greek word. They actually refer to it as something else. And let me say this too, as I'm talking about that. Pyramid is not an Egyptian word. That's not what they called it. The Greeks, when they came to Egypt, they called it a pyramid. The word that the Egyptian used was mir, M-E-R, which actually has the idea of it. The word mir for the Egyptian talks about a transcendence, so that it is a thing or a place from which one elevates or transcends to another place. But in this, the Egyptian left documentation of everything that they did. So scholars, many now, are still scrambling, struggling to understand what has been written by the Egyptian in hieroglyphics and other places that they have written. Well, let me shift now a little bit as I'm concluding with this last point of presentation, is that the Egyptian pyramids, as we know, in terms of archaeology and visible finds, I'll make this note too, that the Great Pyramids of Giza, that in Memphis in Egypt, and in the other places where pyramids we know exist, is not the only place in Africa that pyramids do exist. South of Egypt in Sudan, there are some 200 pyramids, more in Sudan than there are anywhere else on the continent of Africa. I was in Zimbabwe a few years ago. Even in Zimbabwe, there is what is called the Monomotapa Empire, where they were considered as stone builders, and there are pyramids in Zimbabwe. All right. And so our people left this mark of ourselves all over the continent of Africa. And as I intimated a moment ago, even many places around the world. But I make one other suggestion as I am concluding this presentation, that the first and best known structures, that the best known at least, are the greatest in their remarkability of structures we know of in the world, this architecture is Egyptian. But there is African architecture that even predates that. And I hope I got enough time to just talk about this from Genesis, book of Genesis. We start with which most scholars agree that Ham was the progenitor of Black people, of African people. All right. Most scholars agree with that. Of course, all scholars don't ever agree on anything, but at least most of them agree that African people, Black people, came from Ham. The sons of Ham, he names them Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan, or Canaan. The sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Sapteka, Raama, and Sapteka. The sons of Raama, Sheba, and Dedan. This is where I want us to get to, verse 8 and down. Cush was the father of Nimrod. We've heard of him before in other contexts. Listen to what the Bible says about him. Who became a mighty warrior on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. You have to understand that in terms of doing hermeneutics and seeing what is actually being said there. People regarded him that way. He was great. The people saw what he did and they said he was great. But God's opinion of him also was that he was a mighty hunter. Okay. God saw what he did, and God recognized and acknowledged what Nimrod was like. This is what I want us to see. That is why it said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord, verse 10, the first centers of his kingdom were Babylon, Uruk, Akkad, and Calneh, and Shinar. From that land, he went to Assyria, and he built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Ir, Calah, and Rezin, which is between Nineveh and Calah, which is a great city. What is the point that I'm making? That according to the Bible, this is what I talked about before, and the references I gave before were extra biblical sources. That means that these are sources outside of the biblical record. What I'm reading in terms of the biblical record says that the first person to build cities and to build buildings was the Black African Nimrod, and that the first cities that he built were Babylon, and of Nineveh. I'm picking two out of all that I read because those are two that we will have some recollection or some knowledge of, Babylon and Nineveh. These were cities that were built by who scholars regard his grandfather as the progenitor of all black-skinned people. One of the buildings that we'll obviously know of, if it says that the center of his kingdom was Babylon, that suggests to us that the building that he built, which would have been the first of the cities of the world, was the Tower of Babel. It's a black man. Very interesting about this. I'll direct you to chapter to the story of the Tower of Babel, so you'll understand it. Chapter 6, I believe it is, where it says, when God saw what they were doing. Listen to this. God said, let us go down and confound their languages, because whatever they put their mind to do, they will be able to do it. And the Bible says that God went down. There's only two places in the Bible where God comes down, and then three when you in the New Testament you talk about Jesus Christ. The first time he comes is when these black people build this tower to reach up to the heavens. That is the beginning, according to the biblical record, of architecture. I would suggest for us in this season of Black history, as we are exploring and are expounding on what that history and heritage has been about, to realize that from the biblical record, God's idea of this people, that African-American people and people of the African diaspora are descended from, are ones that when God sees what we do, it gets his attention and God will come down. Thank you for allowing me this time for this presentation. And I hope that you all, from anything or something, I hope from what I said, sparks or piques your interest enough that will cause you to go and do some more study and do some more research to find out what the architectural, what the artistic history and heritage of African-American people is. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to pull up some of those photos. I think I pulled up the Luxor in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And so I'm gonna pull that back up if you want to just talk about it. And as you tell me the different pictures, I'll try to pull them up because I don't.
We can do that.
All right, let's just pull that one up. Hold on one second.
Mm-hmm.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. That was excellent.
Bless you. Thank you. Glad to do it.
I believe this is the Luxor. Let's see, is it there?
So that is the Luxor in Las Vegas. And yes, you can see in the foreground, at least of the hotel, of the pyramid itself, that image of the Sphinx, that they went through painstaking detail to be able to represent or represent it there in Las Vegas the way it would have existed originally in Egypt. And then in the background is the hotel itself. And let me say it again, 4,400 rooms make up that pyramidal structure of a hotel in Las Vegas. And you can see in the, again, the bottom left of where the Sphinx is, all of these other statues of smaller sphinxes. And then sitting behind each row are two images of pharaonic people who are at the end of that. This is not just a brainchild that somebody had. All of this exists in Egypt this very way to this day. The ruins are still there.
Wow. Okay. Wow. We're going to pull up, I think it was, you mentioned the pyramid of Memphis. So I think I'm going to attempt to pull that one up. Let's see.
Let's
see if we can get that one.
And let me mention, as you're pulling it up, the pyramid in Memphis, as I called it, you just called it that too, is not to be confused with the pyramids in Memphis in Egypt, because there is another area of burial ground where other pharaohs are buried in Memphis, Egypt. But these are not the same two. Exactly, though, if you pick that up, Memphis, Tennessee is named for the Memphis in Egypt, in Africa. Yes,
So I hope
that
I
is.
picked up the right one. Is that the right one?
That's one. We can use that one. But that is a picture of the pyramid in Memphis. It's an event and entertainment center. And as I said before, there are many groups, many African-American religious groups have had their conventions convene in that building there before. And many other groups use it that way too, because it is a convention center. Set on the Mississippi River. You see the river right in front of it there. And so the location and everything was really interestingly placed, because in Memphis in Egypt, it is set on the river also, just like this pyramid is built. And so they put a lot of thought into what they were doing as they designed this. Again, this is 1991, and the Luxor in Las Vegas built in 1993.
Wow. Okay. Now,
Yeah, and Bass Pro Shops again now owns that pyramid there in Memphis, Tennessee.
got it. And what were the other pyramids?
There were 5 that I did not send pictures of, but the Great Pyramid, I did send a picture of the original Sphinx in Egypt and the Great Pyramid behind it. I think I did 2 of those.
Okay.
And then one of the Great Pyramid itself.
So those I just pulled up. I didn't get what you sent me. So
okay, all right. Well, no problem on that.
yeah.
I'll say this in terms of the design of the pyramid. We look at it today, and remember, you're talking about something 5,000 years old. It's
Wow.
in great state of disrepair, but it is still intact to the point that no crane, no bulldozer can do anything to destroy that structure. But as it existed originally, what we see now is nothing near what it was like. The outer shell of that pyramid would have been laid with limestone blocks, so that in the height of the glistening sun, the sparkle and shimmer of the pyramid could be seen from miles around, all around the plain. It
Wow.
was a spectacular sight to be able to behold. And what we have now is still dazzling, but imagine to be able to see it in its original glory. And that again is the intellect, the ingenuity, the energy, and the work of the African, that Great Pyramid.
Wonderful. I think this has been a rousing presentation. I say rousing, Reverend Williams, because it's got me thinking about going back and reading some of the Bible around the Tower of Babel and determining, just hearing some perspectives and being informed by those perspectives. And I hope across all of our platforms, I'm watching YouTube events as well. I'm hoping that you will dig into this for yourself, go on your own exploration about these wonderful structures that were built and that were dynamic in their glory in their time and day, even now, many of them, but built to last. And I think that is one of the great testaments of our people. I think we are built to last. We have endured much as it relates to the elements of the world. In all kind of seasons, from captivity and racism and everywhere, from kingdoms and kings and queens. So we've seen the sun at its blaze, and we've seen the sun at its scorch, and yet we have lasted the test of times. And so when I think of pyramids, I always think of that part of a pyramid. As you were saying, no bulldozer is going to take it down. And sure enough, in the great rock that we're hewn in, the great stone that we're hewn out of, no bulldozer can take us down. Nothing is going to bowl us over. We are made to stand. We are resilient with great grit and great endurance. So I think of that when I think of these pyramids, and I'm just very pleased and honored for your presentation. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to you joining us on Sunday at 6:00 p.m. for yet one more great evening of Black History Month moments. And I love how you've characterized it on previous nights. On a prior night, our celebration of our Blackness, our heritage, starts January 1st and ends December 31st every year. And so I love that. And I hope that others will join us on Sunday at 6 o'clock p.m. to hear more from Darren Williams and many others that will be joining us on Sunday. So Darren Williams, thank you so much for joining us tonight for this wonderful Black History moment about pyramids. And like I said, I'm going to go and do some more reading and learning and studying. And I'm just fascinated that there's always something new. You can learn about something that you thought you knew just about everything about. And I am just enjoying the journey of this Black History Month. Join us at 8:30. We'll be live on Love and Stuff. You don't want to miss our 8:30 show, Eastern Standard Time, in a little less than an hour. And then Sunday, or of course you can join us every day leading to Sunday, right? We'll be here at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the rest of the week, where we will talk about architecture and the arts. And we'll continue those Black History Month moments as we lead into Sunday. Join us, but join us tonight at 8:30 and join us as we move throughout the week. Thank you across every platform. I see Rondell Murray has joined us. Thank you so much.
Rondell.
All right. Thank you so much, Darren Williams. Have a great evening.